I count on the loving help of my darling wife, Camilla. The headlines blasted like a thunderclap across the UK and beyond. Princess Anne strips Camilla of Queen title. What began as a relatively routine royal encounter quickly escalated into a full-fledged palace earthquake right in front of astonished cameras, flashing lamps, and an audience that couldn't believe their eyes. Camilla, poised as ever, walked onto the red carpet of a state function, expecting the standard royal introduction. Instead, the outcome was nothing short of public disgrace. The announcer, visibly uncomfortable, hesitated before introducing her as Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Cornwall, a term not heard in years. Camilla thought she had lost that title forever. Her smile wavered, her eyes darted sideways. When the cameras zoomed in, the mask broke. The reporters caught it. So did the nation. Palisades scrambled behind the scenes. For months, rumors of an internal power struggle had circulated, but no one anticipated it would erupt so openly and so publicly. Then came confirmation. Princess Anne had acted, quietly but decisively, exercising her royal privilege as the late Queen Elizabeth's most trusted enforcer of tradition. Camilla had not been stripped of her wealth or of Charles's love, but of something even more valuable, the title of Queen. For the first time since Charles took the throne, it was unclear who truly held power within Buckingham Palace. The timing was no coincidence. Camilla's public image had suffered following months of whispered allegations, claims of her attempts to undermine Princess Kate and her growing influence over King Charles. Many warned she was playing a dangerous game, but few expected Princess Anne, the stern, no-nonsense royal who avoided the spotlight, to be the one to end Camilla's reign. The world watched, not just with curiosity, but because something fundamental had shifted. A monarchy already plagued by scandal, succession anxieties, and fractured loyalties had been thrust into a new era. At the center stood an outraged Camilla, a resolute and a quietly observant Catherine the Queen-in-waiting, playing the long game. Two outsiders, Princess Anne and Camilla, had always maintained an uneasy truce, one forged out of necessity, not affection. Behind the choreographed smiles, gloved handshakes, and stiff public exchanges, a cold war had simmered for nearly 30 years. A war not of swords, but of sidelong glances, unspoken judgment, and opposing values, tradition versus disruption. Their story began in the long shadow of Diana, Princess of Wales, and, fiercely loyal to her mother and a strict traditionalist, saw Diana as soft, too emotional, too obsessed with media theatrics. But over time, Anne came to see Diana not just as Charles's wife, but as the human heart the monarchy so badly needed. When Charles and Camilla's long-running affair became public, Anne was enraged not just at Charles, but at the woman who had, in her eyes, sullied the sanctity of royal marriage. Where others whispered or stayed silent, Anne was clear. Camilla, to her, represented the rot that came when private indulgence trumped public duty. Though Queen Elizabeth eventually accepted Camilla, offering her the designation of Queen Consort before her death, Anne never truly yielded. She fulfilled her duties, posed for photos, but kept her distance. Analysts noted the body language. No warmth, no shared looks, just chilly, performative civility. It wasn't just personal, it was ideological. Camilla, once vilified by press and public, fought hard to earn her place. But it never softened. Camilla saw Anne's coldness as cruelty, a refusal to acknowledge her transformation. When Charles became king, Camilla believed her journey had culminated in full acceptance. She didn't realize Anne was simply waiting for her moment. Behind closed doors, tensions escalated. Camilla, emboldened by her new title, began pushing for changes. She altered seating arrangements at formal events, suggested shifts in royal charities, some overlapping Anne's causes, and even hinted at giving her own grandchildren more visibility. Anne noticed, and she was not amused. Sources spoke of icy exchanges, like at a Windsor reception where Camilla toasted herself as the real matriarch now. Anne's cutting reply, "You may wear the crown, but it doesn't mean you carry its weight." It was more than a rebuke, it was a warning. Camilla's moves intensified. She reportedly pushed for her son, Tom Parker Bowles, to receive an official advisory position within the royal household, an unprecedented breach of protocol. Tom wasn't royalty, he wasn't even titled. Yet Camilla wanted him involved in matters of royal planning and succession optics. To Anne, this was betrayal, not just of her, but of the crown. Camilla was reshaping the monarch, injecting her bloodline into its framework. She even floated changes to royal precedents, a symbolic reshuffling of who entered a room first, who sat where, and who outranked whom. To outsiders, these were minor details. In the royal court, they were everything. Anne had tolerated much vanity projects, her subtle jabs at Catherine, and her grip on Charles, but this was the breaking point. Anne voiced her outrage in private. She reminded Charles that titles and traditions were sacred, not toys of personal ambition, but Charles, ever diplomatic, brushed off her warnings as inflexible nostalgia. It was a grave miscalculation. Anne saw the monarchy crumbling into a playground for legacy-building outsiders. Camilla's children, however well-behaved, were not royalty, and to elevate them while William, Kate, and their children carried the crown's future was unacceptable and acted. The confrontation occurred at Balmoral, Casella, quiet retreat turned battleground. When Anne called the gathering, everyone knew something serious was unfolding. Charles arrived tired and unaware. Camilla, confident, assumed it was just another round of palace politics. She had weathered storms before, but Anne was different. This time she came armed not with emotion, but evidence. In a closed room with Charles, Camilla, senior aides, and no distractions, Anne calmly laid out a dossier, mails, documents, decisions, evidence of Camilla's attempts to restructure power behind the crown, with the authority inherited from her mother as the colonel of the Blues and Royals, the Queen's only daughter, and a senior peer of the realm. Anne delivered the final blow. Camilla's use of the Queen title in ceremonial contexts was revoked. She would henceforth be referred to as the Duchess of Cornwall in all public events not attended by the sovereign. I'm my mother's daughter, and she trusted me to defend what she had accomplished. Even the aides averted their gaze during this tense moment. Camilla stormed out shortly after, slamming the door behind her. Charles sat in startled silence, and an ever dramatic or passionate placed the signed document on the table, nodded curtly, and walked away. Within hours, internal palace messages had been distributed to event organizers, press liaisons, and royal personnel. The Princess Royal directed that all references to Queen Camilla be updated immediately. There was no public statement, no press conference. However, the transformation became visible after a few days. Announcers fumbled, the programs were immediately reprinted, and at her next public appearance, Camilla was introduced as the Duchess of Cornwall rather than the Queen. Drew a line in the sand. Camilla was stripped not by scandal or the press, but by a woman who had quietly observed her rise and decided to stop her. The environment was regal, refined, and deceptively relaxing. Dignitaries mingled beneath towering chandeliers, and the crimson carpet of the Royal Academy's fundraising banquet shimmered under the camera lights. It was intended to be a routine engagement, one of many on Queen Camilla's calendar. She arrived in full regalia, sparkling in a diamond tiara and sapphire gown, Charles by her side. Smiles were painted on, but beneath the velvet and grandeur, history was about to be rewritten. Camilla had practiced this moment 1,000 times. The ceremony was simple, a quick stroll to the stage, a formal introduction by the event host, and a brief speech, easy, familiar. But she had not prepared for the host's opening words. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Cornwall. Gasps. Silence. Then awkward clapping. Camilla froze mid-step. At first, she thought she had misheard. Her face flickered just for a second, but the cameras caught it. Her eyes darted to the host, then to Charles, who looked equally stunned. In that moment, the truth dawned on her. This was no mistake. There had been no warning, no private message. This wasn't a leaked headline or tabloid rumor. It was a public declaration, executed with surgical precision. From the sidelines, aides were visibly rattled. One leaned toward an event coordinator. Another reached for a phone. But the damage was done. The cameras had captured it. The Duchess, no longer Queen, was humiliated on the global stage. Reporters, seasoned in reading palace tension, began whispering. "Did you hear that?" One mumbled. "They just demoted her," out loud. The whispers became tweets, which became headlines. Camilla, to her credit, pressed on with her speech, her voice trembling at first, but eventually steady, years of royal media training kicking in. But the damage was irreversible. Every photograph, video, and social media post from the event labeled her with a title she thought she'd left behind. Camilla was reportedly inconsolable that night. She returned to the palace and demanded answers. Staff deflected, blaming a error, but Camilla knew better. The phrase was too clear, too clean. Someone had given a very specific order, and that someone was Princess Anne, that it wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a power move, executed in public, not through gossip or scandal, but by changing a single word in a royal script. That was all it took to undo years of work. Editorials praised Anne's quiet strength, calling it a restoration of royal order. Memes flooded Lynn's Duchess again trended on Twitter. Camilla's stunned expression was paired with photos of Princess Anne, stone-faced and victorious. But the real damage wasn't online, it was inside the palace. The hierarchy had been appended not with fanfare but with silence. Camilla received a clear, brutal message. Your crown was borrowed, and it has now been returned. When Camilla stepped back into Clarence's house after the gala, the facade shattered. In a fury unseen since the Diana years, she hurled crystal glassware at the walls, shattering a vase by the fireplace. Her voice, usually restrained, thundered through the halls. How dare she, how dare and humiliate me like this in front of the world, she reportedly shouted. Aides described her as unrecognizable, sobbing, pacing, shouting about betrayal, lashing out at staff, accusing secretaries of siding with the old guard, and demanding a full